Greetings, fellow tarot travelers, tripping through the tetrahedral triptych of cards I shall now lay before you. I'm Tarot Torch, and welcome to another Circle of Truth. In one of my recent videos, I showcased this deck, the Tarocco Neoclassico Milano from 1810. And this is an Il Menegallo Edizioni from Milano, Italy. And it actually is a very interesting deck. It's about 200 years old, and it's really much more interesting than I had given it credit for. It turns out that this beautiful reproduction by Il Menegallo of a deck published by Ferdinando Gupenberg in 1818 in Milan was originally printed from engraved plates, then hand-colored. Ferdinando Gupenberg was a major card designer and manufacturer in the early 19th century, arriving in Milan in 1809 from Munich. He introduced German technical innovation and taste to Italy. And the interesting thing about this card, although I mentioned 1818, that's the year usually associated with this deck, Il Menegallo seems to give it the date of 1810. Irrespectively, this was a very interesting time in history. Napoleon had risen to meteoric power between 1810 and 1818. And in 1818, Napoleon had conquered the Habsburg Empire and thus all of northern Italy. Napoleon had imprisoned Pope Pius VI, who died due to internment in a French prison. Napoleon later arrested the next pope, Pope Pius VII, and had confiscated and melted down as much church gold and silver art pieces as his men could find to fund his unending wars. Napoleon was deposed in the year 1815. So sort of between the dates given on this box and online when I did my research. At this time in history, Italy seemed to be a very important issue, and since Il Menegallo, who has reproduced this deck, is in Milan, Italy, and Gupenberg arrived in Milan, same place as Il Menegallo is located, to do his work when he originally did the cards, I thought it might be appropriate to talk about Italy today. Now, during this 1815 period, and 1818 period, the Pope's lands and the Habsburg lands were returned from France with the fall of Napoleon, although they were plundered. Cities from Napoleonic rule sought to maintain rulership apparatus and fought wars. As Napoleon's reign began to fall, the rulers he had installed tried to keep their thrones. Among them, Eugene de Beauharnais, Viceroy of Italy, and Joachim Murat, King of Naples, further feeding nationalistic sentiments. Beauharnais tried to get Austrian approval for his succession to the new Kingdom of Italy, and on the 30th of March 1815, Murat issued the Rimini Proclamation, which called on Italians to revolt against their Austrian occupiers, whereas Spain had annexed part of southern Italy. So, in other words, Napoleon came to power, and in the empire he created, it was all of France, the entire Habsburg Holy Roman Empire, which was the Austro-Hungarian Empire, which included northern Italy. And when he was deposed, the lands went back to the Habsburg Empire, but the popes had land which was all of central Italy, and these were called the Papal States. Now, when Napoleon fell, the Pope's powers were limited in France and Germany. Both Pope Pius VI and VII had been prisoners of France under Napoleon's empire, and as soon as Pope Pius VII was returned to Rome, he restarted the Inquisition and the Index of Condemned Books. Now, this was, of course, a problem because it was the Inquisition that led to so much revolution. But to his credit, Pope Pius VII did later condemn slavery. Now, the Unità d'Italia, or the Risorgimento, meaning the resurgence or revival, was the political and social movement that consolidated different states of the Italian peninsula into the single state of the Kingdom of Italy in the 19th century. The process began in 1815 with the Congress of Vienna and was completed in 1871 when Rome became the capital kingdom of Italy. Now, let's put this into context. By contrast, in the United States in 1818, Illinois had just become the 22nd state, and Andrew Jackson, who was the president, was invading Florida to win those lands back from Spain. So we didn't even have our 50 states, and Spain owned Florida. And Andrew Jackson at the time was famed as a hunter who hunted Native American Indians for sport. Also, by contrast, in 1818, a very famous person was born. His name is Karl Marx. Now, if we scoot forward another 100 years and discuss Italy further, in 1918, World War I ends in November of 1918. Now, some of the terre irredente of the Italian national movement did not join the Kingdom of Italy until 1918 after Italy defeated Austria-Hungary in World War I. Indeed, Italy declared war on Germany and the Austro-Hungarian Empire when it signed the London Pact published in 1915. In exchange, Italy was to get various territorial gains, but even after the war ended, Di Revel, commander of the Italian Navy, appealed to the people of the U.S. for Trento, Trieste, Istria, Dalmatia, and the Adriatic. Mostly understood, I think, by our modern audience will be this next sentence. Modern Italy, as we know it today, did not completely exist with its current geographical boundaries until after World War II in 1947. So I hope that puts into perspective some of the history of Italy. Now, if we scoot to the present, giving the bicentennial attention to this deck that it deserves, the European Commission, a commission of the EU, rejected the Italian economic proposal, saying that it included irresponsible deficit levels that would suffocate Italy, the third largest economy in the Eurozone. Investors feel that the collapse of the Italian economy under its enormous debt could sink the entire Eurozone and hasten a global economic crisis unseen since 2008 or worse. So there you have it. Italy is at the center of the world stage because its deficit and its mismanagement is key and critical for the survival of the EU. If Italy goes under, the EU goes under. And Italy's only been a country since 1947. It basically has been a state, a kingdom of small little regions, and hasn't been fomented into the modern state until recently. Well, we're going to look at these cards today and ask, what is the future for Italy and the EU? Will Italy pull together, and will it be able to keep the EU afloat? This is a critical issue because with tensions brewing between Russia and the United States, with difficulties getting oil and resources from the Middle East, with Africa being currently developed by China, Italy is pretty much surrounded by superpowers. If the EU fails, who will protect Italy? So I would like to know personally, what is Italy going to do? And I decided to use this deck that is now 200 years old, not necessarily this very day, but certainly within this decade. What is the story about Italy? And here we go with some cards that will reveal to us the truth. We see that we have the 7 of coins, the 4 of wands, and the Ace of Cups. Now, the 7 of coins deals with a need to accept the integration of new processes and innovations. It's an expansory card for economic growth, where implemented are new techniques, new softwares, new ideologies, new technologies, new machinery, but the need to integrate new systems in order to cause an expansion of the economy. So what this card specifically states is that what Italy needs, besides a miracle, is some type of new bookkeeping, new software, new industrial sector, something that will be a catalyst for complete change. The middle card is the Four of Wands, which is, we've had this card before in several other readings. It is the stalemate card. It's not a bad card. I mean, you know, you can go to town, get dressed up and have a party with your friends. You can have a marriage. You can do all kinds of things during the stalemate years. There's no war, but there's no progress. And so, in fact, we could look at this as past, present, and future, such that the EU was a wonderful economic advantage for Italy, especially when Britain was involved, because the economic success of Britain and Germany, and to a lesser degree France, propped Italy up. And that the EU was the integrating technology that gave a burst of hope to the Italian economy. And now we can see things as a stalemate. Italy is on the verge of economic collapse and about to bring the EU with it. But what do we have here in the future? We have the Ace of Cups. Now, the Ace of Cups is a very interesting card. It speaks about the art in Italy, which is very valuable. But wouldn't it be shameful if Italy had to wholesale out all of its art to be owned by Asian investors and groups of investors from America and Canada, and suddenly could you imagine the Trevi Fountain suddenly showing up in Tokyo? I mean, that really would be a very sad thing. So even though Italy does have finances in the arts that is indicated by the Ace of Cups, I think there's something else being said. The Ace of Cups also is referential to religion. In fact, many people say it's the card of love, but it specifically speaks about religion. In fact, it is the Eucharist chalice that is the model for the Ace of Cups. And so in this regard, we could say, well, Catholicism could save Italy. Well, how could that happen? The poor church with all the poor monks and priests, they don't have much money, do they? Well, in fact, the Vatican has one of the biggest and wealthiest bank systems in the whole world. In fact, many people suspect that the Vatican Bank is funding the whole planet, that in fact it may be the source of money behind the Rothschilds and other large, very large economic interests. So this card could indicate annexing or reliance on the Vatican banking system, or the Vatican's access to international banking systems when one considers all the Catholic nations, especially all of South America, Central America, Mexico, much of Europe. And so there is a great deal of money involved with Catholicism. So what we need to do is look a little bit more closely at this idea of a stalemate. So I'm going to pull another card out. And indeed we get the Nine of Cups. And this is the card of harmony and happiness, where all things go well. So evidently the stalemate is a preferential position for Italy to be in. It's better than bankruptcy, and there's very little hope of economic success at this point in history. Italy doesn't want to sell off its art, and it doesn't want to plunder the Pope's bank account and break open his piggy bank. So in fact, the greatest harmony and happiness comes from standing still. So the fact is, if the EU and Italy are extremely good and efficient at bureaucratizing nothingness, and if they can push legalese paperwork and bureaucracy and edicts in the direction of non-accomplishment, and if the entire apparatus of the EU comes together to support non-progress, and if Italy can just hold on to where it is and not move in any direction, then the EU is going to be saved, because time will endure. And with the passage of time, all things are healed.